I'll start out by addressing a little piece of information I think you all should know. Ori and the Blind Forest, in tandem with its sequel, are probably my two favorite video games of all time. Allow me to paint you a picture. I went and lived in Italy for 2 years immediately following my high school graduation, and in that time, I played no video games. When I moved back to the United States to begin college, I would play from time to time on my roommate's Xbox and indulge in the occasional Super Smash Bros. All-nighter, but that was the extent of my gaming for probably 3 years after I came home from Italy. I was content with that peaceful existence. Sporadically playing a game when convenient was the way I would live and die, until one fateful day, when I watched a video highlighting some of the recent hidden gems in the gaming world, and there was Ori and the Blind Forest. It was love at first sight. I was attracted by the fluidity of the gameplay, the colors, and the promise of a bittersweet story that would pluck at my heartstrings. I decided at that moment to become a gamer in earnest again. Needless to say, my first experience actually playing Ori and the Blind Forest did not disappoint, nor did my first playthrough of its sequel, but we'll get to that in due time. For now, let me illustrate what I think makes this game a masterpiece. Remember to like and subscribe, or the forest will become blind again. Ori and the Blind Forest is a simple enough game. Its movement mechanics, barring a notable exception, which we will discuss later, are par for the course for any modern platformer. The combat is very simplistic, and the story is a simple tale about the harsh realities of nature, the healing virtues of kindness and love, and the bravery of one nimble little cat? Fox? One nimble little Ori. Even the soundtrack, while beautiful and layered, and one of my favorites in all of gaming, often features the same simple themes in a variety of different keys and cadences. What makes Ori so special, despite its simplicity, is the incredible level of polish generously applied to each of its elements that, when combined, form something much greater than the sum of its parts. Let's get the obvious out of the way. This game looks gorgeous. Moving on. Just kidding, come on, we needed to gush about this game's aesthetic a little bit. The colors are so vibrant, the fluidity with which Ori moves and interacts with the world is just beautiful. I shudder to think of the hours and hours of work that went into animating Ori's movement alone. Look at Ori run. Look at Ori jump. Look at him clamber. Look at him wall jump. Now watch this. When he jumps off a wall, sometimes he does a little flip, and sometimes he does a little spinny move. They didn't need to do both of those, but they knew it's the little details that make this all feel so special. Now watch this. When you start jumping as Ori runs, sometimes it's just a little hop, but sometimes he does a graceful flip and it's all just animated and runs so buttery smooth as you soar through this incredible environment that the developers have put together. By the way, I know Ori doesn't have an explicit gender. Moon Studios left it open to interpretation, and I'm calling him a he since I'm a he, and I want my little forest spirit to be a man, damn it. I'm kidding, of course. Call Ori a her if you want to. Maybe I'll switch his gender by the time I review the sequel. There's a feeling of weightlessness when it's appropriate, and of gravity when it's appropriate, and each little detail in the world, as well as Ori's interactions with it, add to the truly handcrafted feeling this game emits. They really make you feel like you're in a blind forest, surrounded by danger, fighting against the odds to restore balance. Speaking of which, let's break down the combat briefly because honestly, it's the weakest part of this game. It consists basically of pressing the attack button and evading enemy projectiles while your little flame friend Cien does all of the work for you. There are some more ways that you can fight as you progress deeper into the game, like using the classic Mario ground pound, or deflecting enemy projectiles with bash. But the combat in this game overall is very bare bones. It's fun enough to not ruin the experience, but I do think it at least succeeds in creating a sense of danger as you make your way throughout the game. Ori is just a little guy after all, and the limits put on your ability to fight make you feel like you need Cien to accomplish the mission. Either that or the developers simply ran out of time before they could craft a combat system that's more fun, but if that's the case, they hide it well enough that I won't complain too much about it. but it's abundantly clear to me that the focus of this game was the platforming. Speaking of which, Ori's platforming may seem to be nothing special at first. You unlock a wall climb / wall jump, a double jump, and a dash pretty early on, but the game changer comes as you enter the Ginzo tree. Here you unlock Bash, which at the time of this game's release was a novel innovation as a movement mechanic. Bash allows you to freeze in time for a moment as Ori is about to be hit by a projectile or an enemy. Aim in whatever direction you please, and then shoot in that direction at speed. It's an elegant and extremely fun movement mechanic that allows for some truly slick platforming. The speed at which you can traverse the world after just 1/3 of the game is exhilarating, and you only add movement mechanics from there. Climbing, gliding, launching your own projectiles from which you can bash, and launching yourself from a fixed position are all unlocked afterwards. It's the classic Metroidvania formula that leaves you feeling powered up by game's end, but you will feel free and swift for the majority of this game's runtime, due to the game's emphasis on momentum-based platforming. Also, because the environments are more open than in other Metroidvanias, the player is encouraged to see how fast they can jump, dash, and bash through the world. And this is what I mean when I lay praise on how free Ori makes you feel, because it truly does. The tightness of the controls, the beautifully realized world, and the sound design combine to create a sense of freedom and fluidity that put me into a state of zen many times throughout this game. Speaking of sound, I mentioned that the two Ori games boast my favorite soundtracks in video games in my Prince of Persia review, and I still stand by that. Gareth Coker has created a masterful suite of orchestral songs in this game that add flavor and true beauty to the game's world. From the bright and vibrant swimming hole area to the mysterious and intimidating misty woods, to the mournful rotting forest, the various area themes are melded with the game's main theme to create a sense of distinctness as well as cohesion. It's a triumph of music and sound design in my humble opinion, but like I said before, though many of this game's individual elements are praiseworthy by themselves, when combined, they create something truly special. Now we're getting to the really good stuff. Maybe my favorite examples of this game's parts coming together to create a greater whole comes in the shape of the escape sequences. Think of these as Ori and the Blind Forest's version of a boss fight. These are 1 to 2 minute segments that must be completed in one go, in which the player must escape the raging elements and escort Ori to safety. The game's manual save feature is disabled during these parts, so you're not weaseling your way out of them. But you shouldn't want to, as the beauty of the world, the fluidity of the controls, the stiffness of the challenge, and the emotional music harmonize to create a truly exhilarating moment. I remember feeling genuinely sad the first time I escaped from the Ginzo tree because that part of the game was over. I absolutely loved the sense of danger and the idea that this daring little tree spirit is defying nature itself in order to save the day. You can feel that Ori is up against the odds due to his small size and the deafening and wild splashing of the rising water and the sheer size of the tree that you are desperately trying to climb before our little hero drowns. But as all this danger is presented before us, the music begins to swell, and we recognize the game's main theme under all the noise. It sounds like hope. It sounds like, despite the elements conspiring against Ori, his bravery will see him through. It's a video game moment I will always look back on with the greatest of fondness. It's truly masterful. And there are 3 such sequences in this game, each of them beautiful and memorable in much the same way. At the end of the day, this game is a story about bravery, about kindness and love, and about how these virtues can overcome the dangers and the evils in the world. Speaking of which, You didn't really think we'd reach the end of the video without discussing the potency of Ori's story, did you? The story itself, of course, is simple. Ori is a spirit that comes from the great spirit tree at the heart of the forest. One day, Ori is detached from the tree and found by the big ol' lovable Naru, who takes him in and raises him as her own. Everything is good, until a clearly upset owl steals the light from the spirit tree, and because of this, the forest begins to decay. Naru subsequently starves, and Ori leaves with nowhere else to go. Eventually, Ori stumbles upon the missing light and embarks on a quest to restore the elements of the forest and eventually return the light to the tree, to save it, and in turn, the entire forest. Alright, from that description, the story does sound a little mystical, to put it gently, but the way Moon Studios tells it is much more important than the story itself. They subscribe to the show, don't tell method of storytelling, comparable to some Pixar movies of yesteryear, specifically the film Up. The beginning of Up has been memed to death at this point because of its heartbreaking montage depicting the life of Mr. Fredricksen and his wife until her tragic death. Still a better love story than Twilight. But what makes this scene so effective is that rather than a narration of the events, we see the events take place in a quick montage as the phases of the Fredricksens' lives play out before us to an evolving song in the background. As Mrs. Fredricksen falls ill, the song becomes somber, slows down, the colors mute, and this evokes a sense of dread and tragedy. Ori and the Blind Forest does the same thing. We see Ori and Naru's relationship during happy times, but once the forest begins to rot, we know that it can't last. Naru eventually gives the last of her food to her adopted child, and it is at this point we know she will not survive. Eventually, Ori climbs to the top of their old favorite fruit tree and clambers down with an armful of fruit. But upon trying to wake his mother, he realizes she's gone limp, and it's too late. I have a serious soft spot for animals, and seeing this innocent little creature losing his mother and only friend brings tears to my eyes every single time I watch it. In my many playthroughs, I typically skip this part because it brings Fox and the Hound levels of sadness to my heart, but I powered through it this time for you, dear viewers. It succeeds at evoking emotion that's just not possible through expository dialogue or narration, and the game follows this storytelling pattern in most of the other cutscenes. Ori's kindness changes the lost heart of Gumo, a frog-like creature who had abandoned all hope. Gumo later saves Ori from the owl, and is also able to revive Naru before the game's end. Here we are shown, rather than just told, the ripples that one act of kindness can sow. We later find out that the owl only stole the light of the spirit tree to protect its last child, and upon seeing Naru's love for Ori at the end of the game, the owl decides to return the light, sacrificing herself in the process. We are shown, rather than told, how an example of love can save a truly misguided soul. This game is bittersweet in the truest sense, touching on the harsh realities of nature and the poisoning effects of anger and hatred, but also touching on the power of love, bravery, and kindness, with the ultimate lesson being that it's never too late to change and make things right again. By the time the credits rolled for the first time and I saw this gorgeous artwork of the tree revitalized, and I heard the triumphant final rendition of the game's theme, I felt that I'd played something not only incredibly fun, but actually edifying. And this, more than any other reason, is why this game will always hold a special place in my heart. This is truly what makes Ori and the Blind Forest a masterpiece.